Let's talk about cove lighting. Architectural coves are one of the most elegant ways to introduce lighting into a space. The light itself is concealed from the eye of the visitor or the occupant. It's really got to be tucked up into the architecture, and so it's magically introducing light through slots in space or popping up onto higher ceilings. Let's take a look at how we construct architectural coves. I'm going to start with a very bare bones cove light. So this is a 1-foot LED strip. It's essentially a tape light with light diodes spaced out every 6 inches. You'll see the distribution of light is just a very wide 160-degree blob of light. We depend on the construction of the architectural cove to shape the way light moves. We're going to pretend that we're lighting along this surface. So I'm going to build an architectural cove to conceal the camera, or to shield the camera from this light source. So if my goal was to light kind of along this wall and up onto this ceiling, the first thing we need is some kind of a shelf to put the light fixture on. That's well and good, but depending on the angle of the shelf, you might still see the light source peeking out at you. So we also need to have an architectural return. Essentially, in cross-section, what I'm doing is putting the return to help cut off the light angle from anyone who would be viewing it across the room. That's concealing the source. So that return is a critical part of what makes a lighting cove work. And here is an example lighting cove built with foam core. You'll notice the distance off the wall that the light fixture is changes how well this baseboard is illuminated. The further from the wall, the softer and more uniform in general the wall appears. Closer to the wall, the more light is collected towards the edge, the more texture we see. Let's look at a different shape. So here, if we have a much larger curved shape, you can see that the distribution pattern, you can actually project it more or less up the wall. Bigger coves provide more efficient delivery of light, but they also take up more space in the architectural world. So our trend in the industry is definitely towards smaller cove lights and smaller coves holding them. I should also show you, well, this is kind of a bare bones, wide dispersion LED that would have to be concealed in an architectural cove. There are also many luminaire manufacturers that make luminaires intended to provide shielding. So this is a wedge-shaped cove fixture. It could actually be installed directly onto a wall and wash up the wall. So in our application here, I would set this against the wall this way. It's providing uniform light and projecting a far distance up the wall, very even light across essentially the wall and the ceiling. These architectural fixtures can really simplify the lighting designer's part in the process because the optics of them are built into the fixture. You have to worry a lot less about cutoff and people being able to look into the luminaire. With that said, it's always important to create mock-ups of your coves so that you understand what the overall effect will be. Because the performance of a cove can make or break a space, and you really want them to be mysterious portals for light to enter into the room.
A knife-edge cove is an architectural cove designed so that the edge of the cove looks as thin as the edge of a knife. There's an example behind me here. And really what you see is a strong geometrical line running where the lower ceiling pops up. You don't see any thick return happening. You don't see any edge to that cove that gives you a sense of the thickness of the materials. Instead, it looks like a two-dimensional line that's happening, separating the lower ceiling from this upper glowing coffer of light. Let's get up for a closer look. So knife-edge coves are always a little bit hard to coordinate. You have to think about the geometry of the room to ensure that the cove is not going to, that the edges are not going to be visible. But here is how a knife-edge cove works. This is essentially the structure of the cove. It's built out of steel or aluminum. This one happens to be aluminum so that it does not warp. And then above that, this is the lens of the fixture itself. That lens is parallel with the floor, so that it is concealed. And then this angled piece is, the angle itself is determined so that if someone is up against the wall, they're not going to see the thickness of this portion. They're only going to see this lower edge. Looking past me, you can see where the knife edge cove meets the perpendicular wall where we have some ductwork. And from up here, you can very clearly see where the ductwork intersects the cove. That the cove ends and the ductwork comes across. However, the way that our eyes and frankly the camera of this phone work as well, when we come back down, the contrast between the lower ceiling and the upper ceiling is such that that cove appears to blend off, that the lower ceiling carries through to the soffit below on the other side, and you lose that sense that the cove ends at the corner. It starts to blend with the perpendicular ductwork soffit to really create this beautiful coffer. So that's how knife edge coves work. That's the overall structure of them. It takes a lot of coordination. You want to make sure once you're up against the wall of a room that you can't look up and see the edge of that knife edge geometry.